Welcome to The Inquisitive Artist. I'm Lindsay Tyson and I'm diving into the lives of artists and art world insiders. How do they create? Can they make a living from the work? And what really goes on behind the scenes? Join me as we explore the realities of life as an artist and the challenges of thriving in the art world. Today I'm speaking with the incredibly talented award-winning artist Hester Berry. I've been following Hester on social media for quite some time and I'm always amazed by her dynamic use of colour, striking contrast and the remarkable economy of her brushstrokes. Join us as we explore her artistic process and uncover the techniques behind her beautifully expressive paintings. So, hi Hester, it's lovely to meet you because I've not met you before, have I? I don't think we've ever met before.
No.
No, and thank you for agreeing to be inquisited, for a better word. I wondered if you might like to introduce yourself rather than me try and do it for you, and just say what the type of work you do and where you're at the moment.
Well, I think I'm I think of myself as a relatively traditional painter. So I'm painting, figuratively. It's all quite realistic, and I'm using oil paint, which is obviously quite a traditional medium. I, um, I'm mainly. I don't like to say I am a landscape painter, but I am mainly a landscape painter. That's mainly what I do. I paint portraits and things as well, or basically anything that interests me. That happens to be mainly landscapes because that's where I find my connection and a play of light. So I guess traditionally a traditional landscape painter really is the label.
Yeah,
If
so you're from Devon, but you
yes.
went to uni in Aberystwyth.
Yeah.
Is that right? So what
Yeah.
made you go to Wales?
It was just again the landscape. Oh, it's so beautiful around there. It's so kind of rugged and it's different to the Devon countryside. And I lived in a tiny little village in Devon, so well, a hamlet really. There's kind of three other houses. So Aberystwyth, although it's a small town, it was still a step up for me. So it was still quite fun and it was full of students. I mean, as any university town is. So it was but also it was just a great uni. We looked at several different universities, and Aberystwyth was quite traditional, so there were a lot of technique based studies and lessons, and I liked that idea.
Yeah, I recently went to the Royal Cambrian Academy. They've got an open exhibition at the moment, and just last week or the week before, I was there, and I met quite a few artists that studied at Aberystwyth, and they're all very proud of being there. I think so. It must be a good
I
course.
loved it. I mean, I know that a lot of the teachers will have changed since I was there, and that maybe the way of teaching has become slightly more contemporary, like most places. But when I was there, it was quite unique. Like other friends that went to different universities had much less sort of technical based learning. Definitely much less life drawing. I had 3 full days of life drawing a week, and it
Wow.
was rigorous, and the teachers were great. It was a really good experience.
Yeah. And you didn't do a foundation or anything? Did you go straight to uni?
Straight to uni. The course at Aberystwyth, the degree was sort of like a foundation in some ways. We did like I said, lots of life drawing, painting, photography, printmaking, and there were opportunities for other things. So it was in some ways a bit like a foundation. It gave you like a taster of many things.
Yeah.
So some degrees required you to do a foundation first, but I
Yeah.
didn't.
So, and then you went to do an MA in Wimbledon. What made you choose Wimbledon?
Um, I I wanted to carry on learning. I didn't, so I did want to go further with my studies. I thought about Aberystwyth, because there were lots of MA painters at Aberystwyth while I was there that were fantastic. So that would have been an option. I think to be exposed to something completely different is good. So Wimbledon was much less traditional, very much kind of theory based and very contemporary, looking at a lot of contemporary art. So just completely different. And then of course it was in London, so a very different environment, and all the art around was very different.
Yeah, was it quite a structured course, or did you have to sort of
No,
create your
no,
own?
it was it was much more. You had to be much more independent, and I think the teaching was much less hands-on. You had to be kind of driven and know what you wanted to do, and it was tricky because Aberystwyth was very nurturing. I don't think they kind of mollycoddled us, but it was very nurturing and encouraging and rigorous. Um, it was Wimbledon was a bit of a shock because I I'd always kind of relied on my technical skill. So suddenly that wasn't, I wasn't like top of the class. It was
Right.
not, that wasn't the be all and end all. And that was really good for me. And it made me look at other things and also taught me a bit of backbone. I had to try to justify myself in this world. Yeah, it was difficult, but I think it was really good for me, and it was so wildly different to
Yeah.
Aberystwyth.
It sounds good that you've had that experience of both sort of sides of art. When you left art college, did you have you been a professional painter ever since then?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to sometimes take, like cafe work or something, but
Mm.
not not that often. I've mainly just been living on my paintings. More recently, I've been teaching, but that's not so much because I've needed to supplement painting. That's more, I don't know, just sort of, I guess joining communities of artists, because otherwise you're really in isolation. So it's just sort of, I found opportunities and I enjoy it, and it's something different and something that gets me engaging with other arty folk rather than just being by myself in my studio, which I have done as well, and it's lonely in the end. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, if the teaching was something that you were doing because you wanted to, uh, well, share your skills as well, and or if it was something that you needed to do. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, I'm lucky. Financially, I don't need to at the moment. It is nice to have like assured income coming in.
Yeah.
But it's more the kind of fun of doing it, the change of doing it. I like meeting new people and going to new places. Um, but it's good for me as an artist because it makes me think about what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and I learn things from other people, and that's fed into me as an artist. So it is quite valuable as long as the balance is right, as long as I don't
Yeah.
take on too much, which I have to be careful of. I have to say no to things or make sure things are scheduled far in the future so they're spaced out.
Do you paint all the time, or do you just like?
I don't paint all the time. I paint, I mean, I'm in my studio at least once a week, which doesn't sound like very much when I say it, but I go out sketching as well. Um, I I draw a lot. My paintings happen quite quickly, so it's a sort of intense, concentrated stint of working. If something happens and I end up going a couple of weeks without painting, I get a bit itchy and not a
Yeah.
very nice person to be around, I expect. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you go out in the countryside and sketch and then bring it back and then create paintings from that, or or do you work from
yeah,
photo, or?
yeah. In the past, I've gone out and painted plein air, but never exclusively. Always kind of as an exercise or a discipline because it's good for you. I haven't done that for a while actually. It's just not fit into my life very easily at the moment. Um, so I'll go out sketching. I think there are things you can't do in the landscape. So although it is good to do it occasionally, there are limitations that there are things I can't explore outside, so it's easier to do them in my studio. I go out sketching regularly and just, being with the landscape and absorbing it.
What sort of materials do you use when you're sketching?
It depends. If I'm going out for like all day and I know that I'm going to be not packing in the miles, not having a good walk, but with the aim of making some pictures, I'll have an A4 or A3 watercolor pad and a nice little carryable set of watercolors. Maybe some Tombow pens, those brush tip pens.
Yeah.
But well, the smaller kit, the slightly more reduced kit would be this nice little sketching tin that I've got that's just by this really nice company called Joan of Art, and it's like three colors, so it's primary colors and a little foldable reservoir pen, and it's just a really great, like, useful. It's a very compact but comprehensive sketching kit that is like cigarette tin sized, so it fits in my pocket,
Oh, that sounds great.
and
Do
a
you have it on
small
you all the time?
yeah, and yeah, because it's just there's no excuse when you've got something really handy like that. Same with the
Mm.
Tombow pens. They're, you know, they don't leak, they don't make your bag dirty like pencils.
Yeah,
Um, when you've got something really handy and easy to carry around, there's no excuse. You're always ready to draw.
yeah,
You always can, which helps. If you're always drawing and always able to draw, it helps your mark making with painting and drawing going onwards. You kind of quite quickly improve and become more fluent without putting in any effort, it seems, if you're just doing it
yeah,
often.
yeah, yeah. So you're actually sketching with a paintbrush rather than a pencil.
I don't like a pencil. I feel it feels grubby. I get like and also my book, because I always have a ring bound book so that I can hold it in one hand. The pencil gets the pages sort of shuffle
Yeah.
against each other, and I end up losing whatever I draw in
Mm.
pencil.
So do you
The grey
actually
pens
stand
do
up
the
and
trick.
paint then? You
Yeah,
actually, yeah, you don't sort of sit
because
down.
I do sit down sometimes, but if I'm walking around, I'm kind of always looking intensely around me for something. And then as soon as you sit, you lose that viewpoint. So
Yeah.
I need to be able to be standing up and not holding too much, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And do you ever use a viewfinder or anything like that, or do you just sort of?
Um, no, but because I always take photos, so the photos are for using back in the studio. I use my I don't print the photos. I keep them on my phone so that they're small. So I'm just referring to color, not detail. Um, so because of that, I've got my phone, so I sort of end up using that as a viewfinder, I guess, a bit. Not while I'm sketching, but just to sort of just to frame the landscape and see what works and what's a good kind of. But you know, drawing, I don't refer to my sketches when I come back to the studio. They are really just to engage with the landscape and to process it um, really thoroughly. And they've done their job. But you know, by the time I finish them, they've done their job. So it doesn't really matter if I frame what I'm sketching um, in a beautiful or pleasing way. It's just doing it and
Yeah.
bringing it all in.
How do you decide what you're going to paint and the composition and how does that come about?
So I will have taken loads of photos and then I'll have a good cull and get rid of things that just don't work, where the light's off or the composition is weird. Or sometimes I'll realize that, like, if it's the sea, it's hot, it's not quite horizontal.
Yeah.
So anything that just doesn't feel right, I get rid of. Um, and I'll when I get to the studio, I'll have a good think about just what I it's quite intuitive. It's just what I fancy, what jumps out at me. Um, and so because of that, so I will have spent time doing, you know, sketching or doing something in the landscape. So I've got more in my head. I've got more than just the photo. Um, and then, yeah, the photo has to make sense so that I don't need to change it. I don't like to alter things because I might take something out or add something that just throws the whole thing. So it has to sort of work color-wise and composition-wise already.
And in your paintings, there's a lot, there's this lovely contrast of the light and the dark and you always have these beautiful sort of light things happening. I don't know how to explain it. And do you just sort of embellish that a little bit? So from a photo, you might not capture that, or do you make it up?
I no, I struggle to make things up. I'm really like I've trained my observation, so I'm very objective and observation based. So
Right,
I don't I try not to embellish anything or exaggerate anything. I think
right.
sometimes the lights and the light areas look very glary in my pictures, but that's because I'm trying to compress a vast spectrum of light and color into a much smaller one. So I don't exaggerate things, but you end up with things getting lost in the shadows and bright lights looking very vivid in order to make it seem as if the spectrum is wider than, you know, the spectrum of paint is wider than it is.
Yeah, wow. So on your website, it says that your practice is rooted in traditional representation, and methods, which you've already mentioned. But you constantly challenge your understanding of painting and explore ways paint can represent effects such as light, time, movement, and climate. And I was just wondering how, when you say that you challenge your understanding, because obviously you're quite a traditionalist and you're working from reality, how will you challenge yourself?
And I like, well, I learn a lot. I like the reading and listening to things about, you know, physics and light and how that all works, and weather and climate. Although I don't think about things and try and shoehorn them in, I think the more you learn and the more that's in your head, it hopefully somehow subconsciously comes out in the painting. But also just exposing myself to other artists' work, even if they're not painters, they're not like mine. I think elements creep in. So I sort of try to learn as much as possible about other things and see how it affects my work. And I think sometimes I notice things in my painting that must have come from something else, something recently learned. And then sometimes just accidents happen as well, like a mark that you haven't made before, like a certain way of painting might suddenly work or make sense. So that ends up kind of going on for a little bit and developing. And I mean, it's always a struggle to try to see objectively. That's, you know, we're not built to do that. So that is always the struggle, and I'm always trying to improve at that and to see just how economical I can be with the paint. So yeah, I guess I'm always trying to build on those elements.
When you say economical with the paint, is that you want to try and create a painting in as minimal way as possible, or is that more of a trying to save paint, or you know,
it's both. I guess it's both. Like from all kind of connected with the focus of landscape is the, you know, the wish to protect it and to be sustainable. And I know that oil painting is not a sustainable, is not a very eco-friendly pastime. The people that buy my paintings have said, you know, it's nice to have landscape to engage with in their homes, maybe if they live in a city. So I hope that the reason for doing it is helpful. It puts people in touch with the landscape a bit, but also I try to be as responsible as I can be as I'm making them. So I don't want to waste loads of paint. I try and use eco-friendly things as much as possible. I try and keep my studio as sustainable as possible. But yeah, I don't want to waste paint. I don't want to paint thinly, you know, I don't want to be
because some of them
scant.
look quite thick, don't they? They're quite chunky.
Yeah.
Hear it
I,
anyway.
but I try to, so I've kind of worked out ways of painting that I think waste as little paint as possible. And but really what I mean when I say that, so there is that, there's being economical with my materials and trying to be sensible and create less waste, but also just to use, like, don't use two brush marks where one will do, that kind of idea, because it allows me then to be more free and expressive with the marks, and it allows like the viewer to bring something. If there's less going on in the picture, it allows the viewer to bring something. I hope. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of what I hope anyway.
Well, I think they're amazing. You know,
But also the paint, you know, the materiality of the paint comes through then. If you're not putting lots of detail in to represent things, you're enjoying the squishiness and the flow of the paint.
And the mark making, like you say, you know, it comes through, and you can tell what it is without it having to be really detailed.
I hope so. That's my kind of aim. You know, I think of it in the way like when you get a pixelated photo, you know, mugshot on the news or an anonymous interviewee on the news. It's a bit like that. You know, you're looking at a person because the colors are correct. You don't need the details.
So you try and represent the colors that you've seen,
Yes.
yeah, as accurately as possible.
As yeah, that's the primary thing. I want the shapes largely to be accurate because you know, the bigger the shapes, the more important. The small details don't matter so much, especially if you can't see them when you're squinting in the landscape, they probably don't matter. So the larger shapes and the strong points of light are important, but the main thing is the color and light, to be as loyal as to reality as possible.
And you use oil paint. So do you ever use anything else, or what made you choose oil?
I use watercolor occasionally. I've had to push myself into using it because it's hard work, but you know, I love it now. It's a challenge. It's still always a challenge. Um, it's like I see it as the opposite of oil paint in almost every way. So yeah, I use watercolors. Occasionally I'll use acrylics just for a challenge. It's good to do something different that I'm not used to. Um, I enjoy pastels. I don't do them as often as I should, but I really like them, and I love seeing other pastel artists when they are really excelling.
Yeah.
And drawing, you know, I love drawing with my Tombow pens. I like different grades of grey. So yeah, I use anything I can, you know, play with anything I can.
Yeah.
But oils mainly.
Is
Oils
that
are
because of the
my
traditional? Because it seems that the tradition seems very important to you from what from what I've read and everything. Do you think that's part of it?
I don't well, I don't think tradition is important to me. I'd be perfectly willing to like, I love the idea of iPad drawing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have an iPad, so I haven't done it. But I love the idea of that. I find it really exciting moving with the times like that. I use, you know, new advances in oil paints are great. I'm happy with all them. So it's not that tradition is important. I think um, I'm happy to go with tried and tested methods because they work and they've been shown to work. It's just what I do.
Do you
I
feel that oil paint is perceived as a better medium? Do you feel that that's part of it as well, or do you think it has anything to do with
I
painting
think it is.
value?
That's not why I do it, but I think it is. I have struggled with acrylics in the past because at school you use like poster paint and watercolors, and
Mm.
then as you get a bit older, we started using acrylics. And then I remember my teacher getting some oils out for me and saying, "Try these." So it was like a hierarchy, and I suppose I've always thought of it like that. And sometimes people bring acrylics to my class, even though they want to paint in oils, they need acrylics so that it can travel easier.
Yeah, it's quicker
Um,
and drying and
yeah, so it's like it sometimes seems like acrylics are the poor man's oils, but since I've bought some decent acrylics, and once you start to see them as a medium in their own right, rather than just the next best step to oils, they are they're a lovely medium, and I've really enjoyed using them. You just have to think of them not as oils. That's the
yeah.
thing.
And would you ever paint acrylic with oil over the top? Because a lot of people do that, don't they?
Well, yeah, I don't like to, I'm careful with the materials. I don't want to um like get things wrong and have things fall off the board. So I tend to just stick with oils. Gesso is acrylic based. So when you buy a board that comes with gesso, that's acrylic underneath.
Yeah,
And people ask me when I'm teaching, people ask me if you can prepare the coloured ground to go under the picture in acrylics, just so it dries quicker.
yeah,
And I think you can. I just don't do it because I want to be sure of
yeah.
its longevity.
So do you always start with a coloured ground? Is that the traditional sort of way of working?
Um, I know lots of artists do. I don't know if everybody traditionally has done that. I know the Impressionists do, which is why I started doing it. So, you know, having a but that's well, there are several reasons for doing it, but I think if you're going to have a slightly incomplete and less refined painting and there are gaps, then it makes sense to have something showing through that isn't just the board or the canvas or the primer. So there is that. And I've kind of just let myself over the years organically find a ground that works and try different things. And the one I seem to have settled on is a sort of sandy coloured ground, sandy woody coloured, because it's warm, so it sets off the bright. So when you're painting, as soon as you put your blues over that ground, the blues really sing out, which I
Yeah.
really enjoy. But it's just psychologically, it's a lot easier to start if you've got something down, I think.
Yeah. And would you, once you got your ground, would you sort of paint out an outline of what you're going to do and fill it, or do you go straight for the?
Yeah, I do paint an outline. I don't do little studies or notan sketches or anything first. I kind of do that on the board as I'm going. So I'll mix up. I think it's sensible to go from dark to lights with oils. So I'll mix up my darkest value and then just roughly with a relatively thick brush that I'm going to work with, sketch out the rough shapes of everything.
You paint the darkest tones in first,
Yeah,
right?
it's with oils. It's difficult to go back in later with darks and keep them really dark, but it seems to be okay to put lights back in and keep them light. So
Right.
there's that. But also, if your lights go on later, they have more weight to them, and they come forward at you more. So it seems like the spectrum, you're giving the illusion of the spectrum of light that you're representing being wider.
That's really interesting. Thanks for listening. Join me and Hester next week for part 2 of our conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment or share. It really helps get the word out and grow the community. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. See you next time.